In 54 BC, the Roman consul, Marcus Licinius Crassus, crossed the Euphrates River and began the First Roman Parthian War. This period of conflict between Parthia and Rome lasted nearly 50 years, and the battles of Carrhae and Gindarus, along with Mark Antony's campaign in Media Atropatene, were among its most significant events. 5 decades of struggle between these two great ancient powers ultimately led them to the conclusion that neither side was capable of achieving decisive superiority over the other. As a result, the groundwork for peace between the two empires was established. In 1 AD, Phraates V, the Parthian king of kings, and Gaius Caesar, the grandson and adopted heir of Emperor Augustus, met with the aim of establishing peace. According to the treaty concluded between them, the Euphrates was officially recognized as the common border between the two empires. Nevertheless, this agreement failed to resolve the disputes between the two empires over Armenia. The rivalry between Parthia and Rome to expand their influence in the region marked the beginning of a Cold War between them, a period in which both powers attempted to increase their influence across Western Asia through the use of proxy forces. In this documentary, we will examine the causes behind the beginning of the Second Roman Parthian War, the details of the military expeditions and campaigns, as well as their political and military achievements and consequences. During the First Roman Parthian War, the two powers, still lacking a proper understanding of one another and of the nature of each other's strength, sought to eliminate the other from the political stage of Western Asia. The continuous campaigns and battles fought between them throughout this period made both sides realize that eliminating the opposing power was nearly impossible. For this reason, both empires sought to secure their position and expand their influence in the region by bringing the small and semi-independent kingdoms of Western Asia under their influence and hegemony. In the 1st century AD, Western Asia was home to several semi-independent kingdoms. The most important among them, which defined the frontiers between the Parthian and Roman empires, included Osroene, Gordiene, Adiabene, Media Atropatene, Cappadocia, Pontus, Armenia, Albania, Iberia, Judea, and Characene. One of the greatest obstacles in understanding the geopolitics of that era is the simplistic tendency to assume that each ruler of these kingdoms was either pro-Roman or pro-Parthian. Friendly relations, or even close alliances with Rome or the Parthians, did not necessarily mean that similar relations with the opposing side could not also exist. As long as these kings did not come into direct conflict of interest with either the Romans or the Parthians, the two empires showed little concern toward their actions, allowing them to manage their internal affairs independently. Among the kingdoms mentioned, Armenia held greater importance than the others. Armenia's strategic position along the trade routes of the Caucasus, as well as its military significance, made both powers especially sensitive regarding this kingdom. The Parthians viewed Armenia as a defensive buffer against Roman penetration into the heart of their empire. The Romans likewise saw Armenia as a barrier against Parthian cavalry. Armenia's geography, consisting largely of rugged and mountainous terrain, protected Roman legionaries from the light cavalry of the Parthians. Based on their experience at the Battle of Carrhae, the Romans understood that confronting Parthian horsemen on the plains of Mesopotamia was deadly. Therefore, they considered Armenia suitable both as a base for campaigns into the Parthian Empire and as a defensive position in the event of a Parthian invasion. For this reason, both the Parthians and the Romans sought to expand their influence in Armenia. In fact, the struggle over this kingdom was the very reason behind the outbreak of the Second Roman-Parthian War. For this reason, it is necessary to examine the political developments of Armenia during the 1st century BC and the 1st century AD. Following Mark Antony's defeat and his withdrawal from Armenia, the Parthians were once again able to re-establish their authority over the region, though this dominance would not endure for long. The Armenians, dissatisfied with the rule of Artaxius II, appealed to Augustus to send Tigranes III, the son of Artavases, who had been living in Rome, to Armenia in order to seize the throne. In 20 BC, Emperor Augustus personally traveled east to settle the dispute with the Parthians and address affairs in Armenia. The transformation of Rome's political system from a republic into an empire played a decisive role in the success of the peace negotiations. An emperor and his advisors were inherently more likely to show consistency in their attitude and policies than a senate composed of hundreds, where influence shifted on an almost daily basis. Quite simply, it was easier for successive kings of kings to deal with successive emperors than it had been for them to negotiate with the line of warlords and less influential governors that emerged during Rome's internal struggles. Furthermore, the internal situation within both empires also contributed to the success of the negotiations. At this time, Augustus was occupied with other concerns. The wars against the barbarian tribes in Gaul and Germania were of greater importance to Rome's security. In addition, after emerging victorious from the civil wars, Augustus sought to strengthen his own political authority in competition with the Senate, and for this purpose, he attempted to expand the influence of his family within Roman politics. Meanwhile, the Parthian Empire was itself consumed by civil war, and for Phraates, eliminating his rival claimant to the throne took priority over conflict with Rome. In reality, both Augustus and Phraates had realized that prolonged war would achieve little beyond draining their treasuries and weakening their political position, whereas peace and the growth of commerce could bring far greater benefits to both empires. Augustus therefore agreed to accept the return of the Roman standards in exchange for peace, and Phraates readily accepted the arrangement. Moreover, as a gesture of goodwill, Augustus presented the Parthian king with an Italian handmaiden named Musa. Several years later, Phraates in turn sent a number of his sons to Augustus in Rome. Although Augustus portrayed the agreement as though he had achieved a great military victory, in reality, no direct confrontation had taken place between the two powers, and Phraates had not surrendered even a fraction of his empire's territory. Thus, both rulers were able to claim victory in the negotiations. With peace restored to the eastern frontier, Augustus returned to Rome. But before departing, he entrusted his adopted son Tiberius with the task of marching into Armenia and placing Tigranes III upon the throne. Tiberius successfully carried out the mission. Yet it was not long before Tigranes III began distancing himself from Rome and drawing closer to the Parthians. Following the death of Tigranes III, his son Tigranes IV and his wife Erato ascended the throne without Augustus's approval and with Parthian support. Augustus viewed this development as a threat to Roman interests and dispatched an army to Armenia in order to place Artavases, the uncle of Tigranes IV, upon the throne. However, The plan failed after the Armenians revolted and Tigranes IV regained the throne, likely with the assistance of Phraates V. Augustus then sent his grandson, Gaius Caesar, to Syria in order to restore Roman authority in Armenia. At the very same time that Phraates V and Gaius Caesar were engaged in negotiations, Tigranes IV, who was aligned with the Parthians, was killed in battle against the rebels. During the peace negotiations, it was agreed that Ariobarzanes, the king of Media Atropatene, would be chosen as the new king of Armenia, and Phraates accepted, relinquishing his claims over Armenia. With the support of Gaius Caesar, Ariobarzanes ascended the Armenian throne. However, the Armenians, who regarded him as a foreigner from Media Atropatene, refused to accept his rule. Those Armenian nobles and aristocrats who opposed Roman influence in their land, despite the fact that their ally, the Parthian King of Kings, was in no position to aid them at the time, rose in rebellion under the leadership of a man named Adon in the city of Artagira. In the summer of 3 AD, Gaius Caesar marched alongside Ariobarzanes against the rebels. In several scattered engagements, the Roman forces achieved victories, though none proved decisive. Meanwhile, Adon, the commander of the rebels, requested a meeting with the Roman commander. He claimed to possess secret documents concerning Phraates V and stated that he wished to deliver them to the Roman general. The proposal aroused Gaius Caesar's curiosity. He suspected that Adon intended to use the delivery of the documents as a pretext to negotiate the terms of his surrender. The Roman commander therefore accepted the request. Thus, Gaius Caesar went to meet Adon without taking the necessary security precautions. While he was occupied examining the alleged documents, Adon suddenly attacked him with a sword and severely wounded him. According to Roman sources, Gaius never fully recovered from the physical and psychological consequences of the wound. When the legionaries learned what had happened to their commander, they stormed the walls of Artagira and captured the city. Ariobarzanes was crowned in Artagira and was officially recognized by the Romans as King of Armenia. Yet fortune did not favor him. In 4 AD, Gaius Caesar, the sole supporter of Ariobarzanes, apparently died from the very wound inflicted upon him by Adon. Following the death of Gaius, the opponents of Ariobarzanes seized the opportunity and assassinated him in a conspiracy. After the death of Ariobarzanes, his son ascended the throne under the name Artabaces III. However, his reign too proved short-lived. Like his father, he failed to gain the support and respect of the Armenian nobles and was murdered in 6 AD. Following his death, Augustus placed Tigranes V upon the Armenian throne, yet the Armenians refused to accept him as well. As a result, Erato, the wife of Tigranes IV, was made his co-ruler. The reign of Tigranes V was also brief, and before long he was replaced by Vonones I, a prince of the Arsacid dynasty. To better understand the later developments in Armenia, it is now necessary to turn our attention to the Parthian Empire and examine how political events unfolded there. Following the conclusion of the peace treaty with the Romans, Phraates V failed to consolidate the foundations of his power in Parthia. Born to an Italian mother, he faced opposition and distrust from the Parthian nobility from the very beginning of his reign. Aside from his paternal lineage, whose mother was originally an Italian handmaiden, the Parthian nobility viewed him as Rome's Trojan horse. When Phraates took his mother Musa as his wife and made her his partner upon the throne, the Parthian nobles, unable to tolerate such a moral disgrace, rose against him and put him to death. In 4 AD, following the death of Phraates V, the Great Parthian Council, known as the Mahestan, composed of members of the royal house, the Parthian feudal nobility, and the Magi, assembled in order to choose the future king. The result of this gathering was the selection of a man named Orodes as the new king of kings. The reign of Orodes II lasted no more than 2 years. A harsh-tempered man, he failed to keep the nobility satisfied, and for this reason, he too was killed by them. With no suitable candidate available to ascend the throne, the Parthians requested that Augustus send back the eldest son of Phraates IV, Vonones, to Parthia in order to assume the crown. Augustus sent the Parthian prince eastward with great wealth so that he might ascend the imperial throne. He hoped that the rise of Vonones would mark the beginning of a new chapter in Parthian-Roman relations, one in which the two powers would grow closer than before. Yet when Vonones arrived in Ctesiphon, he only brought disappointment to the Parthian nobility. Vonones possessed more of a Roman manner and character than commitment to Parthian customs and traditions. As a result, the nobles regarded him as a puppet king of Rome. For this reason, they quickly united against him and gathered around Artabanus, king of Media Atropatene, in order to elevate him to the position of king of kings. The selection of Artabanus for the throne is noteworthy, for he did not belong to the principal ruling branch of the Arsacid dynasty. It is possible that a branch of the Arsacid family had gone to live among the Dahai during the reign of Mithridates II, and Artabanus emerged from this line. He was connected to the royal branch of the Arsacid house only through his mother, who was a daughter of Phraates IV. Around 6 AD, following the death of Artavases III, Artabanus gained control of the throne of Media Atropatene through means that remain unclear to us. Shortly afterward, encouraged and supported by the Parthian nobility, he rose in rebellion against Vonones. Artabanus marched toward Ctesiphon with his army. After several difficult battles, Vonones was defeated and forced to retreat. He fled toward Armenia, and in 12 AD Augustus appointed him king of Armenia. 2 years later, in 14 AD, Augustus, the great emperor of Rome, passed away. Although Augustus had paved the way for the succession of his adopted son Tiberius during his lifetime, the transfer of power did not proceed smoothly. Internal struggles and Tiberius's efforts to consolidate his position temporarily diverted his attention from affairs in the eastern provinces of the empire. Artabanus took advantage of this opportunity and in 15 or 16 AD marched into Armenia in order to finally eliminate Vonones. Following this invasion, Vonones fled to Syria, where he sought refuge. The events unfolding in Armenia once again turned Rome's attention toward the east. Emperor Tiberius sent his adopted son Germanicus to Armenia in order to place Zeno, a Pontic prince, upon the Armenian throne, a decision that also received the approval of the Senate. Zeno was in fact the son of Polemon, king of Pontus, yet because he had been raised in an environment deeply shaped by Armenian traditions and culture, he enjoyed considerable popularity among the Armenians. In 18 AD, Germanicus marched alongside Zeno toward the city of Artaxata, and there placed him upon the throne under the name Artaxius III. The presence of Germanicus, the adopted son of the emperor, in Armenia caused great anxiety for Artabanus. Granted extraordinary imperium by the emperor, Germanicus effectively became the ruler of Rome's eastern territories. All the legions stationed in the east had been placed under his command, and he possessed full authority to wage war or conclude peace with the Parthians. Artabanus found himself in a difficult position. On one hand, there was the danger of another war with Rome, and on the other, the presence of Vonones in Syria posed a threat to his throne. There was always the possibility that dissatisfied nobles might once again call upon Vonones to reclaim the throne and ignite yet another civil war throughout the Parthian Empire. For this reason, Artabanus requested that Germanicus expel Vonones from Syria, and he also proposed that the two meet near the Euphrates. Germanicus politely declined Artabanus's request to meet, yet he accepted his request regarding Vonones and sent the Arsacid prince to Cilicia. In 19 AD, Vonones managed to escape from Cilicia after bribing his guards. He intended to travel to Armenia and once again wage war against Artabanus, but he was captured along the way and killed shortly afterward. At this point, it is also worth turning our attention toward developments in the eastern regions of the Parthian Empire. Around the same time as the death of Vonones, Gondophares, who was likely a member of the House of Suren and held the satrapy of Drangiana, declared independence from the Parthian Empire. Marching eastward, he defeated the Indo-Scythian kingdom and expanded his dominion as far as the Indus Valley. Although the House of Suren had established an independent kingdom, it appears that members of the house continued to maintain a presence within the Parthian court and administrative system, and likely retained their hereditary privilege of placing the crown upon the heads of Parthian kings of kings. The complex relationship between the Parthians and the Indo-Parthians reflects both the intricate nature of their political structure and the limited extent of our knowledge concerning it. The independence of the House of Suren and their conquests in the east clearly demonstrate that the eastern frontiers of the Parthian Empire were every bit as politically dynamic as its western borders. Just as Rome possessed the Danube and Rhine frontiers in the west, the Parthians had the Oxus and the Indus in the east. Unlike Rome, however, our knowledge of events along the eastern frontiers of the Parthian Empire remains extremely limited. Between 18 and 35 AD, a period of roughly 17 years, no major clashes or military confrontations between the Parthians and Rome's proxy forces in the east are recorded. The stable position of Artaxias as king of Armenia, as well as the presence of Germanicus, albeit brief, with extraordinary authority, likely played a role in easing tensions between the two powers. Furthermore, the events unfolding along the eastern frontiers of the Parthian Empire mentioned earlier should not be overlooked. Beyond these developments, an incident that occurred in Babylon also deserves attention. In 20 AD, two Jewish brothers succeeded in gathering an army and defeating the satrap of Babylon in battle, thereby taking control of his territory. Artabanus, taken by surprise by these events, responded with moderation. He accepted the rule of the two brothers on the condition that they refrain from raiding and plundering the neighboring lands. However, the two brothers soon invaded the territory ruled by Mithridates, the son-in-law of Artabanus. Unfortunately, the sources do not specify exactly which satrapy Mithridates governed. Nevertheless, according to Josephus, the rebels managed to defeat Mithridates in a humiliating manner. In 35 AD, Mithridates rebuilt his forces, marched into Babylon, and with the cooperation of the city's inhabitants, defeated the rebels. Artabanus's policy toward the rebels is particularly noteworthy. Rather than adopting a harsh approach, he accepted the rebels as the new satraps. Had he acted otherwise, there was a strong possibility that the two brothers might have extended a hand of friendship toward Rome in order to oppose the Parthians, further complicating the situation. Yet Artabanus's restraint prevented the formation of any possible alliance between the rebels and the Romans. In the end, it was the rebels themselves who laid the foundations for their own downfall. The relative calm that prevailed between 18 and 35 AD should be regarded as the calm before the storm. In 35 or 36 AD, Artabanus, now having stabilized the internal affairs of his empire, once again moved to bring Armenia under his control. He gathered an army and personally took command of the invasion of Armenia. In the next episode, we will examine the Parthian invasion of Armenia and Rome's proxy war against them.